Welcome to This Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here. Today, we're stepping right into the absolute pressure cooker environment of post-World War I India and the inevitable explosion that followed. It's this fascinating, chaotic window of history where global shifts, broken promises, and totally brilliant new strategies of resistance all collide at exactly the same time. Okay, let's dive into this. So, what actually happens when a desperate nation is pushed right to its breaking point? That's the big question we're answering today. We're going to skip the usual agenda and jump straight into the rising historical tension that completely reshaped the Indian subcontinent in just a few short years. Part 1. The post-war pressure cooker. India contributed massively to the British war effort. Men, money, you name it. But when the dust settled, industry hit a sharp recession. Businesses were literally on the brink of collapse. Workers and artisans, they bore the absolute brunt of it, with severe unemployment and crazy high prices. The peasantry was basically being crushed by taxation and poverty. And imagine being a soldier, coming back from fighting in trenches abroad, only to find your home country poorer and with even less liberty than when you left. Add to that the educated urban classes facing blatant racism and no jobs. Literally every single cross-section of society was hurt in. And this whole domestic nightmare was compounded by global events. During the war, the Allies promised all these great things: democracy, self-determination, just to rally the colonies. But the Paris Peace Conference? Total reality check. The imperialist powers literally just carved up the colonies of the losing nations for themselves. It completely shattered that whole myth of white cultural superiority. Oh, and then you have the 1917 Russian Revolution, sending shockwaves everywhere. The Bolsheviks overthrowing the Tsar proved to the Indian people that, hey, if the masses actually unite and get organized, they can successfully take down the mightiest of tyrants. Moving on to Section 2, Reforms and Repression. Now, the British government, they were absolutely not about to let go of their power. Instead, they pulled out the classic carrot and stick approach. Basically, they offered some pretty flimsy constitutional reforms as the carrot, the reward, while simultaneously gearing up these extraordinary repressive powers as the stick to punish dissent. Let's look at that carrot first. All right, enter the Montagu-Chelmsford, or Montford, reforms of 1919. This created a system called diarchy, which is really just a fancy word for splitting power at the provincial level. But look at how they split it. The reserve subjects, the real heavy hitters like law and order, finance, land revenue, they stayed completely under the British governor's thumb. He could even veto bills outright. Meanwhile, the transferred subjects, things like education, health, agriculture, were handed over to elected Indian ministers. But here's the kicker. Those ministers had absolutely zero control over the actual finances or the bureaucrats they were supposed to be leading. It was a complete recipe for constant friction. And if you need more proof of just how tiny this carrot was, look at this number right here, 1.5 million. Out of a massive population estimated at around 260 million people at the time, voting rights for the central legislature were given to just 1.5 million individuals. So the vast, vast majority of the country still had absolutely zero political voice. Which brings us to Section 3. Enter Gandhi, the catalyst. So Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returns to India in January 1915. He'd already spent years in South Africa fighting white racism, organizing the Natal Indian Congress, and really honing his totally novel technique of nonviolent resistance, Satyagraha. But when he gets back to India, he doesn't just jump straight into politics. Actually, he spends a full year just touring the country, trying to truly understand the masses. He even rejected the big Home Rule agitation because he didn't think it was right to agitate while Britain was tied up in a war. But by 1917 and 1918, things change. He rapidly kicks off 3 localized struggles that would basically serve as the ultimate testing ground for his methods. That takes us right into Section 4, Testing Satyagraha in India. First up, Champaran in 1917. This was his first real act of civil disobedience in India. European planters were forcing peasants to grow indigo under this exploitative Tinkatiya system. When authorities explicitly ordered Gandhi to leave, he basically said, "No, I'm staying," fully ready to go to jail. And the government actually backed down. Then, in Ahmedabad in 1918, he goes on his first hunger strike, fasting unto death to support cotton mill workers who were just getting crushed by wartime inflation. Finally, in Kheda, after severe drought completely wiped out crops, he organizes his first massive non-cooperation movement, a tax revolt, working alongside devoted leaders like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And these methods, they actually worked. Take that Ahmedabad strike, for example. The workers initially demanded a 50% wage hike, but Gandhi showing a really pragmatic understanding of negotiation, told them to demand 35% instead. His fast put so much pressure on the mill owners that they finally submitted to a tribunal. And guess what? The workers were awarded exactly that, a 35% increase. Through these three movements, Gandhi didn't just test his techniques, he earned the deep, unwavering respect of the Indian masses. But hey, remember that carrot and stick policy we talked about? Just as those flimsy Montford reforms were rolling out, the British government brought down the stick, and it was brutal. Gandhi famously called it the Black Act. Officially, this was passed in March 1919 as the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, but everyone knows it as the Rowlatt Act, and it was unbelievably draconian. It literally allowed the government to try political activists without juries or just throw them in prison for up to 2 years without any trial at all. The backlash was instant. Every single elected Indian member of the Imperial Legislative Council, including heavyweights like Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Madan Mohan Malavia, resigned in protest. Gandhi, who had supported the British war effort, felt totally betrayed. His response? He called for a nationwide mass strike, a hartal, to kick off on April 6th. Section 5. The Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. To understand this tragedy, we have to look at how things escalated in Punjab. On April 9th, two nationalist leaders, Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal, were arrested totally unprovoked, just for speaking at protests. The very next day, thousands of Indians marched in solidarity. The police responded by firing into the crowd, killing several protesters. Obviously, this sparked horrific riots. 5 Englishmen were killed and an English missionary woman was severely beaten. Sensing a total loss of control, the British sent in Brigadier General Reginald Dyer to impose martial law. What happened next on April 13, 1919, shocked the entire world. A massive crowd gathered at Jallianwala Bagh to celebrate the Baisakhi festival. Most of these people were from neighboring villages and had no idea about the martial law orders. Yes, there were some political protesters, but it was mostly just unarmed families. General Dyer arrives with his troops, surrounds the gathering, and completely blocks the only exit point. Without issuing a single warning to disperse, he orders his men to open fire on this trapped crowd of men, women, and children as they scrambled to escape. The sheer scale of the horror is hard to even wrap your head around. And if you look at the casualty data, it perfectly captures the massive disconnect between the empire and its subjects. Official British sources claimed 379 people died, with about 1,100 wounded. But the Indian National Congress estimated the death toll at over 1,000, with more than 1,500 injured. This immediate denial and manipulation of the narrative set the tone for everything that followed. The entire nation was just completely stunned. The immediate aftermath saw Indian leaders making huge personal sacrifices. Rabindranath Tagore, he outright renounced his British knighthood in protest. Gandhi was so overwhelmed by the violence that he returned his Kaisari Hind medal and actually called off the movement on April 18th. The trauma from this ran so deep that decades later, in 1940, Udham Singh assassinated Michael O'Dwyer, the lieutenant governor who had overseen the brutal suppression in Punjab. And the official inquiries? They only cemented the divide. The British set up the Hunter Committee. Sure, they condemned Dyer, but they imposed absolutely zero penal or disciplinary action. Zero. Astonishingly, the House of Lords supported him, and a British newspaper actually raised £26,000 for him. Even famous authors like Rudyard Kipling pitched in. There were even clergy at the Golden Temple who strangely declared Dyer a Sikh at the time. On the flip side, you had the Indian National Congress setting up its own unofficial committee, with Motilal Nehru and Gandhi. They, of course, unequivocally condemned the massacre as completely inhuman and called the martial law totally unjustified. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. How does an empire possibly maintain its moral authority after such a catastrophic use of force? Well, the short answer is, it doesn't. The events from 1914 to 1919, climaxing in the absolute tragedy at Jallianwala Bagh, permanently shattered the illusion of benevolent British rule. It set the stage for a much longer, much more determined and newly organized fight for independence. India's leaders now knew exactly what their freedom was going to cost. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.